Welcome to the Keeyns Taxi, where we pick up clients and industry experts for a drive and chat about the world of tax technology. In this episode, Ramon van Aarle, CEO and co-founder of Keeyns, sits down with Martijn from Dayco. Together, they dive into the challenges of global tax compliance and how smart software can make all the difference.
So Martijn, great to have you in the taxi. Great to meet you again. Do you mind give us a short introduction of yourself and your function?
Sure. Martijn Rovers, Dayco Head of Tax, a global automotive supplier headquartered in the Metro Detroit area, and responsible for corporate and international taxes and everything surrounding that.
Okay, so it must be a busy job you have.
It's quite a busy job, certainly from the perspective that most corporate US tax teams are quite lean and mean, so that's a full yes.
Yeah, and how many countries are you working at Dayco, and how big is your team, tax and finance?
Right, so we have locations in around 20 countries. Add to that our sales purview is actually larger than that. We are global. We're selling globally. And my team, depending on whether you include people that are mostly responsible for local compliance, the corporate tax team, so excluding those, is close to 5 people.
Okay, 5 people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and then you work with multiple advisors throughout the world, probably.
Yes, we work with both global advisors, local advisors. Of course, we have some automation solutions, but it's a mix of basically all of those. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, and when you first heard about Keeyns, what kind of issues and challenges were you facing in your day-to-day operations?
Well, you know, if you figure that we're a 700 million company right now, we've divested a couple of or one particular business, but we have around 300 compliance filings annually, and compliance is just a part of the responsibility, right? So imagine with 4 to 5 people, one person is also has a broader role, even managing just the basics of that, right? Knowing that even the compilation and get together of those filings is outsourced. It's a major challenge.
Yeah, it's a
to
major
be honest,
challenge
to manage all of that.
And how did you manage that? Was that with Excel or was that a role that you gave to your advisors or people internally?
It's a combination of. You're always dependent on let's say, the weakest part in the process. So we do have automation solutions that roll up into provision and or preparation for the actual compliance, like on a consolidated level. If, however, the process into that final process is Excel and having back and forths per email, then that's really what drives the workload and what drives the complexity and what doesn't allow you to get the central view in transitioning from a decentralized function to a corporate tax centralized function.
Right.
That's one of the main challenges that I've found.
Yeah.
Not only with Dayco, but I've generally in my in-house career seen that as one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, of course. And as a tax director, tax technology is a big topic within your role. For how long is that relevant for you? Have you been working on that for years now?
In one way or the other, yes. And tax technology comes in very different flavors and colors, right? So learned in the meantime, it's really dependent on where are you in terms of maturity level with the function or company, or what's the appetite for automation. But yes, working on that for I would say the last 6 to 7 years, and it's now exponentially growing in terms of opportunities, possibilities. It's the challenge is really to find your way in the automation landscape.
Right. Yeah, because there's a lot out there, and you have to pick the tooling that can help you out.
It's all out there, but is it a fit to your organization, to your function? What are your priorities, and how does this fit in there?
And where did you immediately saw the fit with Keeyns?
So I think the compliance process is one of the key parts of a corporate tax function where there is a big win to make in terms, because one, it's super relevant to have the control to ensure that you have the appropriate internal controls executed. You can have them on paper, but how are you going to control 300 filings and making sure that the payments that relate to that are properly signed off by the appropriate people after having reviewed those positions, especially when they get material.
Right.
So that's one. Secondly, it's local compliance that rolls up into a global consolidated filing at some point in a year, and there is a lot of data points that go into that consolidation, and that's where it helps drive and anticipate some of that information flow, taking it out of the hectic of the actual process you're amidst once a year.
Right. Okay. So it makes your life more easy.
It helps spreading the work and centralizing, having the visibility without having to go through this already overflown inbox back and forth. And people, that's really a challenge, because people already have a day job, and corporate people chasing data, and then next round having questions around that data is just
tons of emails.
Inefficiency all over the place, full stop.
Yeah. Okay, so Martijn, you have been using Keeyns for I think 6 months now. If you had to explain Keeyns to a colleague, what would be the benefits of the product? What would be your storytelling?
My storytelling would start with simple to use, great visuals from a dashboard perspective, gaining insight. I just mentioned we have around 300 filings a year. To be honest, if you would have asked me the same question 1 year ago, I couldn't have confirmed that.
No.
That is one. Simple to use for people that not necessarily are all just 100% dedicated tax people. So that's your finance team can work with it. What is also a really main selling point for us is that you can integrate with the external advisors. So there's not, let's say, 5, 6, 7, 8 platforms, big 4, tier 2. Everyone has a model, a piece of software where a local country return is posted on. No, you can now have them work with your tool and have it in one central place, no multiple login tools. It's really there where you like to have it, where you like to store it. The other piece, there's 2 other pieces. One is audit trail. So you are actually, while just working with the software, you are creating your audit trail. Version control becomes manageable. That's the other part, and the opportunity to have then the central repository in one place, I think, tops it up from my perspective.
Yeah, great to hear. Yeah, so you invite your advisors to your platform instead of the other way around, that you have multiple platforms where they put their advice in. Yeah,
absolutely. And having the oversight for me as a head of tax, it allows me to have more of the helicopter view. Where do we stand? Which regions? What is high risk in terms of filings outstanding? Where does it affect the cash position? Where we know we have large prepayments coming up. So it really does just provide efficiency in my day, and it provides focus in terms of where to follow up or focus on.
Great, that's great to hear. And did you experience any difficulties from the advisory side that they should join Keeyns and work through your portal basically?
To be honest, outside providers, I mean, we're the customer, right? So they should adapt. It's not just click of a button and they switch, but I would say that's the manageable part. It takes a bit of time, a bit of change management, but I think the change management is there and something you should focus on. I think the assistance from the Keeyns team with the short lines and the conversation with the team really helps a lot. It's really teams that are used to work in a certain way over a number of years or many years.
Yeah.
Where, especially if you combine that with a truly decentralized organization, right? If you're responsible for a plant, right, and you need to just you have these other not just number of tasks, but just compliance. Tax is just a part of your overall responsibility. Then changing that's behavioral. And that's some change management that it requires.
Of course.
When people do start seeing the benefit, meaning a little bit of investment, getting to know the tool, that's the easy part. But then also the benefit when you get to the point where usually corporate tax departments start raising questions on return to provision, prep for the annual consolidation cycle, and you see that those questions are now either not raised or they are raised from a perspective that they already have the data. That's a different starting point and avoids a lot of communication meetings, and that also allows, where possible, to go directly to the outside service provider and not disturbing a finance controller with 10 other tasks.
Yes, so it's enhances efficiency. Yeah. Right.
It's yes, that's the magic word, and that boils down into various angles where it really helps and distinguishes between a controller being able to make his day or not.
Yeah. So when using Keeyns, Martijn, you have your own workflows at Dayco, and then can you talk us through how many people are normally on average working in a certain workflow, and is it finance and tax all together, or?
Yes, good question. So we have set up our own workflows. We used the standard flows available in the system to not because we're necessarily want to be difficult or different from others. So I think we're maybe not that different from a regular, to the extent it exists, global multinational with local jurisdiction taxpayers. What was important for Dayco, and I didn't highlight it yet, is that control also means we have the right set of eyes to local returns dependent on the level of materiality in terms of cash payment, in terms of risk management. So we've designed the workflow such that we allow the right level of sign-off in the organization between local centralized tax, but also finance, right? Even treasury or those kind of roles into a P and AR where applicable. So that's where we did some custom design, and once set up, it's easy to use the templates, even designed, let's say, for a taxpayer, to then use that as a new template and to roll it out
template within your organization,
regionally or wherever, however you'd like to design it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And if you look at the onboarding process, what have been your experiences? How fast did that go in the end?
Yeah, so as I highlight, I think the change management within the company is something just to keep in mind, right? That there are some real hours involved. And we've worked really well. So the way we did it, a colleague of mine is really dedicated, Keeyns expert, to get into the detail. First of all, understand your own process. As standard as a corporate income tax compliance filing and compilation process sounds, there are nuances, and sometimes the nuances are relevant to set up the actual flow that you wanna implement. So that's where we started. Know your flows. That's where you learn about your internal process, right? So that provided us insights. We then set up the basis. We didn't try to do everything at once, so we had a regional approach and then an approach direct tax. Let's split it from indirect tax and look at where the common denominators are in terms of standardization, and then have a rollout plan on that basis. And we received a lot of support from the Keeyns team in setting it up. I think the fee structure, right, helps. So we're not sort of in a mode like, let's not pick up the phone because the fees start counting. That's never been the case in our process. We've had a real one-on-one, not only information but also sort of experience building with the back office Keeyns team, and that helps. And that flexibility you need both in your organization, also with the service provider, and that worked really well with the Keeyns.
Yeah, that's great to hear. It's a joint effort to create the portal for Dayco, right? And then let's do a fixed fee. Why not? That's an honest process, right?
It's clear. It's quick turnarounds, and that allows you just to get into it and focus on adapting the processes, setting it up.
So Martijn, we have been working in tax for years now. Where do you think the puck is going on the international tax level, and also with respect to your role and IT tooling like Keeyns?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts there. It's, as we know, right, compliance burden doesn't get less, it gets more complex. We have all these international developments that are not necessarily all aligned with each other, as an understatement. And I think one of the key takeaways, or the key focus points for tax department is where do you want to spend your time in all this complexity? By the time you have adapted, and even if you were to insource more people to deal with a certain compliance burden, then it has changed already again. So you either need new profiles, other profiles, now add automation, but let's not forget that strategic planning is also, there's also like cash tax management, and all of that is also a key part of the tax function, right? So where do you want to spend your time, and what does that mean in terms of your department setup, right? And automation in the other areas beyond compliance, the landscape is changing on a daily basis almost, right? There's more opportunities, there's plenty of opportunities, but finding your way in the automation landscape and building a strategic plan around that is then even more difficult. Highly specific to the company and the phase it's in. Yes. Coming also back to risk appetite, etc., those kind of things. So the position that we take is where we can have the efficiency gains like today, and then let's do so, right? Yeah. Let's not be dependent on other factors. Let's take what you can take now in terms of change, right? Yeah. Start somewhere.
Yeah. Plan big and start small with.
It's not even small, but you at some point you really just need to start. There's no over-encompassing one single tool that will allow you to push the magic button.
Yeah, cover it all. Yeah.
No. So that's the approach we took, and as you kick that off, and as you start seeing the the result of that, you can start building add-on. And as the landscape develops, we're working also, we're liaising with the Keeyns team to see what could be a next step. Where are we? Would there be other add-ons? Is there functionality?
Yeah.
What else would we like to in the future see available on the platform? That's where we're at currently.
Yeah. And do you think the machines will take over entirely? If you look at the tax function, or will it be machines with human beings controlling that?
That's a very difficult question to answer, and I think one part of that is what time frame do we look at? I think in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 to 15-ish years, it's definitely not the machines are going to take over completely, just simply because the entire chain, how does an organization work, how do tax authorities work, and there are big steps being taken in terms of automation also on the tax authority side.
Yes.
But to be honest, that can advance only as much as the slowest mover in that process, right? And that's so there will be just a very diversified landscape. Yes, automation, but what we sometimes tend to call, like, let's say, is that manual automation or is it true automation, leaving aside AI, right? AI is already there. We are starting to use that today. But we also have tax returns in some examples that we still need to send by some kind of electronic fax machine from 25 years ago.
Yeah, it depends on the country, right?
And that's the reality, right?
Yeah.
So in the next generation, in the next 15 to 20 years, the midterm, there might be elements where there's highly automated processes that really go towards machines take over, and that might sound negative. I think where there are processes where that might just be a good fit, right?
Yes.
Low risk, not too material type of processes. Yeah, why not? If you're 100% off, but it doesn't lead to a compliance risk because authorities have adapted to allowing those processes to be automated, why not?
Yeah.
High risk, high material, more M&A type of work, for example, is a whole lot more difficult to automate. So I cannot really tell whether there will be a day.
No,
right?
Nobody can, right? But it's challenging and it's exciting also to see where it goes.
It makes departments just being ready for change, and change is the key word, and there's change in various different colors and phases, and now there's more variables added to change, right? It was like maybe in or outsource, or which type of provider do you use. Now there's automation. There's much larger efficiency gains with automation than, let's say, 10, 15 years ago. People didn't want to be dependent on automations. There was a trust element.
Yeah.
And now that's shifting exponentially with adding AI to that whole realm of what is possible.
Yeah.
Which makes it even more exciting.
Yeah, true. So, Martijn, after using Keeyns for a couple of months now, what are the main advantages you experience now in your day-to-day operations?
So anytime during the day, I can just within 2 minutes, my dashboard see where we are in terms of compliance. What are the red, amber, or greens, and what's our overall status? Yeah. And if there are ambers and reds, we can just zoom in and say, okay, it's a known topic. We can start raising questions with the right people and teams, even if you don't work with them directly, because the workflows are set up, the people that are responsible for that part of a workflow. So you find your way directly, one click of a button, in your own organization. So it's also getting to know your own organization.
Yes.
Where are the hiccups? Where does it become visible? Where does it work, and why would it not work?
Yeah, right. Can imagine. So you immediately see a small fire burning and you can handle.
For me, that's really a main benefit. The benefits, if I speak on behalf of some members in my team, is they have readily available data, latest version file, version control, and right a starting point for raising questions on the content rather than verifying is this the latest version, but what changed, or just put your comment out there and we'll work with you based on what you've input in our system.
Yeah. What do you think about tax teams who don't have support from IT tooling? What will be their future?
Well, I think in a way they're maybe without realizing it today, I think they're slowly walking to a cliff, right? Because organizations that do start to adapt, that do keep up with the pace that automation and efficiency now allows you to think and act differently, it will just become unbearable at some point, right? Meaning you have a large your department is just not ready anymore to deal with the data flow. To me, it's all about big data. It's not just a tax return. There's like, let's say 20 data points on a tax return that have a feature that you need elsewhere in your process. And that becomes just too big to handle manually. Right,
yes.
and the risk management to that will start to shift to levels of automation. It's no longer just an ERP or a consolidation tool that flows into, but there's going to be a whole landscape of different tools. Now, will that all be sort of consolidated in that magic one tool? Absolutely not. But I think we need to realize that data just becomes part of this big data pool. And to some extent, especially when AI is on the horizon, as long as you have those data points, not on a fixed printed return somewhere in a repository, in an old-fashioned repository, but you have the 20 data points out of that return, you can basically use it whatever you want with all that is coming and ahead of us with AI agents, etc., etc.
Yeah. So massive change. So just jump on a tooling and think about it. Otherwise, you're running towards a cliff. Yeah.
I would. Yes, I think you have to. I think again there are different sizes of companies. There's different maturity levels. There are companies that have a different views on a same topic. But I think you have to move, and even if it's working for you now. Imagine what your team is freed up with if they can spend time on other parts in the process and diversify and build their knowledge differently or more efficiently.
Yeah. Martijn, thank you very much. We had a nice ride. I learned a lot. Can you share some final thoughts on Keeyns and also on people with the same job like you in the international tax field?
I would say just start the conversation, right? By talking to the team, you start getting a bit of the look and feel of Keeyns. You develop your own thoughts on how this is tailored to the solution that you're looking for. Some kind of a sandbox experience, and that just really helps developing your thoughts. I think what will be really interesting to see is what with the current Keeyns vision, the future add-ons. There's multiple directions. There's all kinds of thoughts that we have that you could sort of develop from here. Yeah. So what we will certainly do is follow those developments, provide input to it. Great to see that the team is open to suggestions, and we're Dayco. We're one customer, but I think there are as different as companies can be.
Right.
I look forward to speaking to other companies in sort of the same position, trying to find their way and discuss and see. And to me, that's really helpful to see where what are we working towards, and what kind of a future solution would that be? There's various options, right? There's other players in this market, but I think this is a very workable tool that is on the market today, not tomorrow. So we are happy to be part of that journey.
Happy to have you on board, and let's make an even better Keeyns together. Thank you very much, Martijn.
Thanks, Ramon.